So welcome again, Saltmarsh GAM number 2. This is fabulous. We have Maurice Gibbs moderating. We've also invited Martha Butler, who grew up in Sconset, so most of the conversation will be about Sconset, but if we go off into whatever direction, that's what a GAM's all about. So let's have fun, and everybody raise their hand and put their 2 cents in, because that's what we're all here to do. Alrighty.
Thanks, Laura.
Take it away.
All right, taking it away, the first thing I want to do is have those people that have lived in Sconset raise their hands. So we know who we're talking to here. But the second thing is, I am going to turn it over, this unstructured presentation, over to Martha and let it go from there. I do have a sort of a crib sheet of questions I could ask and so on. But let's just start with Martha reminiscing about growing up in Sconset.
Okay. Mom brought me home on March 21, 1929, under the name of Martha Louise Holgate. I lived at corner of School and New Street. I was brought up with a brother and a sister. Although we had 13 children and 10 of us lived to be adults. Excuse me? I don't think it's mine, I shut it off. I'm sorry. Mine is off, is somebody else?
Somebody else went off.
Let's see, and I went to Sconset, at the Sconset School, one-room schoolhouse for 4 years. There was only 2 of us in the 4th grade when I left to take the bus to go to Academy Hill School. If you got any questions, ask me and perhaps I can fill in, but that's where I started.
Well, your reminiscence, you spent a couple of days walking Sconset.
Well, that was just recent. That was not back when I was growing up.
Okay.
I won't mention that.
Martha, how many people were on the bus?
Pardon?
How many people were on the bus coming from Sconset to Academy Hill?
I don't know if let's see how that could be mine. Is it yours?
Yeah.
I don't think so. It is yours? Okay. How many people lived in Sconset?
Were on the bus.
We were on the bus. There were the Saradellises, there were the Reese, there were the Cahoons, there were the Holgates, there were the Eldridges, the Buntings. I would say there'd be at least 15 or so of us on the bus every day.
And now there's 5.
Now there's 5?
Yeah,
That's all?
that's all.
So we've actually gone in the other direction, although Sconset is a much larger city now.
Yeah. But they've all, as far as the kids go, it's Tom Nevers.
Sure, I understand. Yeah, they're all out there.
I had an awful lot of relatives in Sconset. I was related to the Rogerses, I was related to the Cahoons, and the Reese, the Coffins, the Egan's. My father had a sister named Bertha, and Bertha married James P. Coffin. And between my father's children and Bertha's children, we filled up Sconset.
Ultimately, yeah. Now, how many years between you two in the school system there? You also went to the Sconset school.
Yeah.
Who went to the Sconset school amongst you? You did too, yes.
If that's me, throw it away. Excuse me. Put it up in the other room. I'm not going to answer it.
You haven't figured out how to shut it off. So, memories of that, and I've been trying to pin down who the Sconset school teachers were, and I know them, but I can't pull it up.
I know one.
The first one that I had was Kippy Ingram,
Kippy, there, that's who I could pull up.
2nd grade and halfway through the 3rd grade, and then it was Clarence Rogers.
Okay.
That was the extent of what I had out there. I did first grade at Academy Hill.
Okay.
And before that, it was Miss Levin, I think.
Cranston.
Oh, yeah, that was a long time after.
Yeah.
I was driving bus
My-
when she was up.
My school teacher was
I had your
Jessica
kids on the
Eldridge.
bus.
And when she was, when she retired from the school because she wanted to marry, then I had Edith Levins.
Oh, yes.
And Edith Levins, her favorite friend was the ruler. She had the ruler in her hand constantly. We'd be sitting
And it
at,
was used, obviously.
yeah, we'd be sitting at the desk, you'd either tap you here or tap you in the head, I don't know. My brother Donnie got so, he hated Edith Lewis as his teacher. He would not do a thing in school. So my parents sent him off island to a family member who was a school teacher and got him over that hump and brought him back to Nantucket, and then he went to Academy Hill School. But I do remember of once of getting that ruler myself. We girls out the schoolyard were flipping our skirts like the can-can girls. Well, Edith didn't like that, so she took us in. The school had two rooms. The south side was for the class. The north side is the community club used to use it for their meetings. So she took us in that room and gave us the ruler on the hands. So that's my Edith Levins. In August of last year, they had a session at the casino to reminisce about the Sconset School. So I did do it for them, and those were a few of my stories. Another thing that we used to do at school, and on Friday nights and whatever, we'd play kick the can. And we would
Square.
put a large can, put a smaller one on top of it, and try and knock the can off. Well, we were playing it in the schoolyard one day, and the can got me in the head. I still have the scar. And I lived across the street, so I just ran home with blood running down my face. But I kicked the can. Mother said, "You better not play that anymore." So kicked the can, was gone. But what else was I spending?
Martha, you were saying you had a cow, right there. You had a cow in your yard.
A cow?
Yeah.
We always had a cow, always. We always had I think my family used to have a donkey. When my oldest brother was older, he used to go back and forth with the donkey. But we were brought up on raw milk. My dad always had a garden. My father used to work for the AP at Sconset, and he also had his own little store, and he used to run it with a treasure chest on the boardwalk in Sconset, I call it. Yeah. And I don't know if that was the store or not, but the fellow with the rubber nose, I can't think of his name.
Walter Kelly.
Walter, yes. He broke into the store one night, and they tried to find out who did it. Well, eventually they found out because his nose, he wore a black rubber nose, and his nose was in the barrel of flour. They found out.
You don't need fingerprints when you got a nose.
And then someone asked me, how did the laundry start? Well, my father being a merchant, he went from job to job. He used to do eeling. He used to sell coal, wood, and ice by wagon. And then my mother decided to take in laundry for a few people in Sconset, especially the summer folks. And I'd come home from school and I'd have to step over these piles of sheets and things in the kitchen. And they set up the living room in our home as an ironing room. We had iron boards and the ladies had irons that came off the stove in the kitchen. And that is how Holgate's Laundry started. And Dad decided, well, let's go that way. So then they graduated to Tavern on the Moors. That was a playhouse at the time. I think it was Mr. Howe used to run it. And whether the bank had it or what, I don't know. But we used to go in there as kids and run around inside because it was always open and always empty. So then Dad moved the laundry in there, Tavern on the Moors. And
Was that
the
by the
laundry kept growing and growing. And finally he decided, I guess we better go to town. So then we went to Judge Poland's house on Lily Street. And he opened the laundry on Lily Street, and when he retired, my brother bought it, and he took it to Vesper Lane. But that's how the laundry started.
Yep.
Where was the Tavern on the Moors? Somebody was asking. Was that?
Tavern on the Moors was next door to the, I'm going to say, the
Hoscott House. You got the
schoolhouse.
school, the Hoscott House, and then Tavern on the
Oh,
Moors.
okay.
Yeah.
they're right
Headed
together
towards
there.
Main Street.
Okay.
And while my father had the Tavern on the Moors, he used to run little parties in there and things. He loved to have people get together. He was great for doing things like that. And Sconset also had a community club. And they were very good to the children. They would give us all kinds of parties, Christmas parties. At Easter time, we'd have special affairs going on. And they would also have their own little potluck dinners and masquerade parties in the community club. But that was in the room on the north side of the school.
I know this is before your time, but did your parents ever talk about Prohibition and what that was like on Nantucket?
Well, she was in Prohibition time, right?
Yeah.
Prohibition.
Prohibition.
Did your parents ever talk about that?
No, because I was born in 1929.
Yeah, you were too
Yeah.
late, so I wondered if your
It's
parents
pretty much over.
I wouldn't remember
Yeah.
much of that.
But speaking of that earlier period, your father was part of the crew of the Mass Humane boat that would do rescues out of Sconset. And they did their last rescue in 1914, and I've got record of it at the Life Saving Museum. They paid him $2 for an all-day row out to the Beatrice, which had run on the shoals out there. And C.C. Morris, you remember C.C. Morris, Phil Morris's father, he was paid $3. He was in charge.
Yeah, he lived down on King Street.
Right. And now, you people that grew up in Sconset, you know where that last life-saving station is now that used to be at North Gully? And in fact, everybody knows where North Gully is? The Sconset folks do.
Yeah.
It's just kind of north of Codfish Park, right?
Right.
You go from Codfish Park north, and now you're in what's called North Gully. And there is a life-saving station that's now a residence up on Baxter Road, 18 Baxter Road.
Wow.
And that was the station out of which your father operated in North Gully when they did the rescue. And Bud Egan took me out there one day and told me the story that Roland Coffin was in charge, and with a block and tackle and a team of horses, they cut the building in half and hauled it up the bluff and then put it back together, and they hired Henry Coffin and Bud Egan, 2 kids at the time, to shingle it. Until the day one of them died, it was always the other guy's fault, because one started at one end shingling, one started at the other, and when they got to the middle, Roland was very unhappy with them. It didn't work, and they had to start over.
Well, you're probably wondering what we did during growing up at the Sconset School.
Yeah.
Friday night was the night that we all got together, and we'd all meet at the school. And of course, our favorite game was hide and seek, and it was holy and free if you got in. And we kept doing that until somebody went, yoo-hoo, and then it would be Mrs. Fields calling her children home at 9 o'clock. So we all had to go home at 9. If there was snow on the ground, Mr. Fields would, because he worked for the Sankaty golf course, he would pile us all in the truck and take us up to the Sankaty Head golf course and go sliding in the evening.
That's nice.
And then, because Saturday night was Mom and Dad's shopping night and a chance to go to the movies or something, so we were left home with a babysitter, which is usually a relative. And that was always fudge night. Every Saturday night, we made fudge. We did most of the entertaining ourselves. We played Chinese checkers, we made pom-pom rugs, did puzzles, and made our own entertainment. As I said, I had a lot of relatives in Sconset, and we were just like one big family. We felt as though we owned Sconset. In the wintertime, south of Main Street, you wouldn't find any of the houses open. They would all be shut up and drained for the winter. And I think, I'm gonna call it King Street North, there would only be 1 or 2 homes north of that that would be occupied. Most of the people lived in the center, or in what we called below the bank. Now, below the bank, back in our day, was for the poor people, and the black lived there. We had some wonderful people down there. There was a David Scott, and he used to play with my brother Kenny, and David was always at my kitchen table with our meals. I have here Clarence Wilson's daughter today, and Clarence used to work with my father at Reagan Houston's house. That's that huge brick house over by the gully, which I believe I went by it the other day. It looks it's going through a great renovation at this time. We used to go sliding a lot, my sister and I, and we used to go down what we call Hairpin Turn, which is the north end of the Wade Cottages, kind of round in that area. And we also used to slide down the Stone Gully. And down below, right at the foot of the Stone Gully, was Mrs. Aries' little candy shop, and she also used to sell a little few baked goods and sandwiches and things. Down below the bank, the Thomases used to have a fish market, and the Santoses lived there. And the Stans Highs all lived down there. And I remember one story. Grace Stans High, her mom and dad were hard workers. And Grace was asked by her mother, what did you do after school today? She said, well, I went above bank and played with so-and-so. Her mom didn't approve of that. Segregation back then, I guess, was going on. But
Grace was a classmate of mine.
yeah. But I don't know, I just felt as I owned Sconset. We went to the casino just for the movies. And we used to sit upstairs in the balcony. Let's see what else. Any other questions, John?
What was the Sconset Market there?
Well, there was a John Salvis. He used to come just in the summertime. He had a barber shop, he had gas pumps, and he had a very small grocery store. And that's where I used to get my whoopie pies for 5 cents. And I used to go to his barber shop. My mother would send me there for my haircut. I went once I came home and I cried for a week. He cut my hair so short, I never had it cut again. It grew in my eyes. And I do remember that. It was bad.
How about your brother,
My father told
Youngie,
about
and his
going there.
airplane? He used to commute from,
My brother? Oh, yeah, my brother, of course, was a pilot.
yeah.
And I'll tell you, all right, Ann Coffin, who was Henry Coffin's sister. She was in Boston, and Alan saw her, and he says, "What are you doing here?" She said, "Well, I'm trying to get home." She says, "And Northeast Airlines is canceled. Come on, I'll give you a ride home." So she did. She got in his plane, and he says, "So you're going home, right home?" She says, "Yes." And she says, "You're gonna land there?"
Yes, he did all the time.
And he did, right there at the Coffin farm, right across away from, I'm gonna say across away from the water company. So he landed in there, and they said, "What are you gonna do about the wires?" He says, "Well, we'll just go underneath them."
And he did,
And
many
he
times.
did, and he flew out, and that was it. Ann couldn't believe it.
That's when he lived on Lindbergh Avenue and had the hangar built in the backyard,
That's what I was thinking
landing in
of.
Jim Coffin's pasture.
He'd land right in that pasture, and you didn't think he had
Landing
room
went
to
up
do
the
it.
hill.
Yeah,
But that little plane could take off on a dime.
yeah.
Yeah.
He used to bring the papers back and forth too, through that
Yeah,
plane.
right.
Now, during the winter, and they must have had it during the summer too, but I remember mostly in the winter, they would have police officers patrolling Sconset on foot. And Maurice's father was one of them.
Through most of World War II.
Yeah. And we would, they would all stop at Mom and Dad's to chit chat and have a cup of coffee or whatever. And Mother would haul out a box of chocolates. John evidently didn't like soft chocolates. So John, his father, who was John, would pick up a chocolate and push the bottom of it with his thumb. If it was soft, it went back in the box until he got a nice hard one. I'll never forget that. I used to sit and watch him do that.
That was kind of really a night watchman job in World War II, but I can remember one time towards the end of the war, it may have been after the war, there was a gentleman that was kind of a trustee in the POW camp in Maine that ended up in Sconset. You probably remember this. I can't remember the name of the detail, other than my father knew him, and one day a couple of federal officers arrived to arrest him.
Yeah.
And took him off, and I can remember my father coming home being pretty upset that he knew everybody in this little problem and didn't have a clue that this guy was wanted. And I think he was Austrian, but of course he'd been drafted into the German army, been captured, and was kind of a trustee in Maine, and somehow as the war ended, or right in that time frame, he ended up in Sconset as a handyman.
Your father replaced my father as the police officer out there at night. My father replaced his father.
There you go. It just goes right around. Now, what time frame did the Loran Tower go in? That was about 44, 43?
Yeah.
And
43, because they were in a panic down there when the hurricane of 44 went through.
That's
They
right.
thought the ocean would get them, and it didn't. The swamp in back of them filled up, flooded them out.
It did?
Yeah.
It actually
You know, when you go down the Low Beach Road and you make that slight bend to the right? Well, that was as far as you could drive. They went up to Elmer Davis's dory, and that's how they got back and forth down there.
I do remember my father took us, my mother and my sister, and we drove out to the Tom Nevers Bluff. And that was the only time I've ever seen the waves actually beating against the bluff.
Yeah.
And I mean, I was just a little kid. I still got that picture up here. Yeah, and that water was high, very high. But I can remember the other thing was that Loran, and it was Loran A in those days, ruined about a third of our AM radio frequencies. The one whole end of the radio,
You
you
couldn't
now,
use.
whatever you've been listening to in that area, you no longer could hear it. All you heard was that, that continual static of the Loran A. But everybody kind of took a deep breath and, well, it's wartime and we've got to do our, so don't complain about it. Yeah, yeah. Then ultimately, when they moved to Loran C, that kind of went away. But I remember for a long while, that was, especially here in Nantucket, we had an awful time with, and all we had was AM radios then. Yeah, so.
I don't remember much about the Sconset Schoolhouse
Yeah.
When did that
because my father arrived on Nantucket in '38, and I didn't arrive on Nantucket until '41, when a maid's job opened up where my father worked on the Houston estate, and my mother was able to get that job, and she brought me with her. So the Houston stayed until October, and my mother had to put me in school someplace. So she put me in school in Sconset. So I was only there for September and October. And then, so I have very little recollection of it, but I do remember it was a one-room schoolhouse, and we were all in that room together. But my recollection of Sconset is I had a wonderful time growing up. Summers in Codfish Park. And I played with the Santos kids, and I played with the Davis kids, and I played with you. And also the Upbank youngsters, the Reynolds Tobacco, which owned Reynolds Tobacco Company. Their girls used to come and ride me around in their $5,000 at that time cars, with the top down. That was thrilling for me. Absolutely thrilling. So, I had a wonderful time summers. And of course, my parents bought the house that I'm in 1950. They toiled long, long hours on the Houston estate, and we lived there until they purchased the house in Codfish Park, which I still have, and which is still in the family. But anyway, I have great, great memories. And of course, I was born in the South Bronx, and we lived in a tenement. And so when I came to Nantucket, it was heaven. And so different from growing up on the sidewalks of New York. Although I did learn a lot growing up in the South. Nantucket, is the only area, the only house that I can say, well, I grew up here. All of the buildings I grew up in have been demolished. So it has, truly significance for me. And coming back here in 2017, after losing my husband, it was the place I had to be because of the memories of my parents and my sisters and growing up there, memories I will cherish forever.
So there are families, probably like the Green family, the Wiley family. Their parents would come here and probably come about month of June and do their work, like the Wileys did the Chanticleer, and they would enter school in September when it opened with us, and then they would leave us and go back home. So we had a lot of imports, I guess, for school.
Yeah, but you mentioning the teacher with the ruler.
Yeah.
Iski Santos' point used to be the yardstick.
Oh, boy.
The teacher kept it in the bottom by the chalkboard, in the middle of the north wall. We'd go out at recess in the afternoon, we'd get the kids in the first grade, and we'd go back in, you guys start raising hell. They were over by the window, the teacher's over with them, Iski's pushing their hands around on the old regulator clock, they had no glasses, so we got out of school earlier. And we used to love it when the fire siren went off before they went to the air horn. The whole building would shake just like that. The lights would go out. It took so much electricity.
How about other Sconset residents and memories? memories of your time in Sconset?
I have lots of them because Joan and I played together.
Yeah.
My mother used to work
Yeah.
up at the Houston also.
Jackie remembers a
Yeah,
lot.
and my aunts went to school with Martha.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
I think that's-
they only spent 2 full winters here. My mother was already out of the house because she was the oldest, but every summer was just fantastic out there. We didn't do an awful lot like nowadays the kids are,
Yeah.
But we played jacks and went to the beach, and when the fire horn rang, it was time for lunch, so you'd go up for lunch, 12 o'clock. You always knew it was 12 o'clock.
That's right.
Go up for lunch, but another thing, like what Joan was saying before, I had an aunt, and I remember Joan Craig once telling me she was an up bank person. My aunt was a down bank. And so she said that her mother wouldn't let her play with my aunt because she was a down bank person. So, and she wanted her. She liked her so much she wanted to play with her. So,
Now, that's a phrase that even, that's the first time I've heard that phrase, but it's kind of interesting. Up bank and down bank.
Yeah.
oh, well, even when Grace Yates was, before she passed away, and it was in
Yeah.
the paper, and she brought out her birth certificate, and it said she lived in Down Bank.
Yeah.
So,
That's something.
yeah.
Yeah. Now, during that wartime period, my family lived over on Old South Road, which was a dirt road, and Nobody at Farm Road was a dirt road. So my only connection with the Sconset schools people was my sister and I had to walk up to the airport and out the dirt road, Nobody at Farm Road, to meet the school bus.
Yeah, we picked
And
you up
I
on
probably
Milestone
rode that
Road.
school bus with you occasionally.
Yeah.
And on a February day, that was a memory.
Long walk.
It was a long hike because the school bus couldn't come in that way. Actually, Old South Road was just a maze of ruts and wet areas. Whenever the thaw came, there was some clay there. You couldn't have put the school bus in there in those years. And I just marvel as I whip out those roads now and think about it. But,
The school bus goes to start in town and come out the Sconset Road, and they'd probably pick up the Coffins and the Saradellises, because he lived right on the Sconset Road. Then they'd stop at the school, and most of us would have to be at the school to meet the bus. And then the bus would continue the Popus Road, and it would stop at the entrance to Quidnet and pick up Shirley Souza. I think she was Shirley Johnson then, the Johnson girl. And I'll never forget it. The poor little girl, her mother would put her hair in curls. And they were stiff curls. And I said, oh, that poor girl. Her mother made her wear those to school. And I'll never forget it when she got on the bus at Quidnet.
We had, talking about Codfish Park, we had everything in Codfish Park. We had, a fish market, we had Mrs. Airy's store, we had a hairdresser, we had everything in Codfish Park. You didn't have to really even go out of Codfish Park if you grew your own vegetables.
And a nice public beach then right down the street from you.
Now, how about summer people? Anybody remember the rich and famous there? And
Oh, yes,
a few of
oh, yeah.
those people?
Now, we lost Sconset then when the summer people came. That's another segregation thing. I always felt they were above us.
Yeah.
And they had the casino, they had Sankaty Golf Club, they had the Chanticleer, they had Moby Dick, and all those. And they seemed to take all that all away from us, but we got over it. And when September came, woo, we got Sconset back.
But they did leave some money behind.
Yeah. They left, we needed them.
Scott's family
How many
had a,
people, on average, how many people lived in Sconset when you were growing up?
When I was growing up, oh boy.
Or how many families?
Well, there was one, 2, 3, 4, my family,
Codfish Park
families
was
about
much
50.
larger
What, about
than
100
it is
people,
now.
I guess?
100 families?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, that was a big, and also, when did the school close out there? Must've been in the 50s.
1963.
Was it that late?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I
It
remember
was
Pat
late.
Waterhouse, Patty,
Uh-huh.
one of the last teachers out there.
Yeah.
I went to school with Pat. Yes, and she was one of the last teachers, was it that late in the 60s?
Yep,
Yes,
Wow.
because it was the year I got married, that's why I can
Oh,
remember.
okay, that's a good year.
Yeah.
I used to babysit Snooky.
And she survived it.
When did the A and P leave Sconset? I mean,
When World War II started, they never opened it up again.
What's that?
That belonged to old Clipper Cleve.
Oh,
who
When
owned
did the
house
soda
right behind
fountain
it.
stop? You know, they had the soda fountain in that
Yeah,
building,
when did that close?
next to the post
Yeah,
office.
oh, it was probably about 15, 20 years ago they pulled the soda fountain
yeah, when they were kids.
Does
out. Put a
anyone
Scotch
remember
cafe in there.
the dance hall that the Scott family had up near Sankaty?
Yeah, Scott's
And near the golf course, was up in that area. And many of the
You went there?
blacks,
Oh, yeah, I danced.
particularly those who were domestics, used to go there on their days off to have a celebration and a party and a dancing. That, I don't know when they sold that.
I thought that was at Codfish Park. I've got a
No,
No, Scott's Hall.
She talked about Scott's Hall.
Yes.
The building is still there,
Yeah.
on
Yeah, that's
Sankey
it.
Golf now. The building's still there.
It's still there.
Yeah, it's right behind
Building
me.
is still there.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, the building is
Yeah,
still
the
there.
building's still there.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, it's been sold.
Oh, yeah, yeah, Sankey Golf.
Did your father call?
How much of
My father used to
Codfish
sell
Park washed
sandwiches
away?
And booze on
Well,
the
there's
side.
been an ebb and a flow to Cottage Park over the years, isn't that right?
Yeah.
It's come and it's gone. I was told at one time that, and I can't remember who told me this, but said, oh, well, my father says that he used to stand on the walkway there by the treasure chest and were able to throw stones in the water. And then it grew out to what we kind of remember. And then it came back, and now it seems to be growing again. A little bit.
A little bit,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Most of the growth is just south of there.
I wish I'd have thought of it, I'd have brought it in. I've got an aerial photograph of
That's good.
the center part of Sconset taken in 1925.
Oh, good.
And you can see how much of the beach is gone. And somebody says, well, how can you date it? I says, the new steel water tank that's been built on the hill,
Yes.
referred to by the Sconset kids as the Coors can on the hill. The wooden shed hadn't been put on there yet, and the old wooden tank up on stilts was still on the corner of Burnell Street, and that was taken down November 10th, 1925, according to the argument settler.
So you can date it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, pretty much the same with the water tank out here
Yeah,
on the north coast. We can tell roughly when that was there by those photographs.
yeah.
Do you have stories about climbing up that old water tank?
No, I didn't mess around with that. My messing around was on the top of the town clock. With the guy's gold leaf in it. I was 15 years old.
Now, I do remember somebody telling me that for some years, whenever a light bulb needed to be changed on the Loran Tower, that your brother, Donnie, did that.
Donnie,
Yeah.
Now, that's 630 feet.
I remember Donnie going up there.
Yeah, I remember that, and he used to
You
do
couldn't
it
pay
for-
me enough money to go past 100 feet, let alone 630 feet.
Yeah, about 10.
I think the FAA had some towers out in Mattocket.
Yes, they had 5 towers
Used to
there.
put
And
it up there, too.
he had to change some bulbs that day, and they're doing some painting and et cetera on the poles. And he says, I asked him if I could use his car. He had a nice Plymouth convertible. And he says, okay. So he let me use it for the afternoon, and then I parked near the towers, and he was up there doing this. It was get away, because they would paint. And he didn't want to paint on his nice little Plymouth. I'll never forget that.
And then we had a storm that took all 5 of those towers down simultaneously at once. Yeah. But I do recall that Donnie in his younger years used to climb that tower, and I just can't imagine going up 630 feet to replace a light bulb.
I can see it.
And I can't
But I
imagine
can see
a
him doing
boy,
it, yeah.
a boy coming home on a school bus, which is Donnie, pick up his pliers, probably some screwdrivers, and head up to my brother's on Lindbergh Avenue,
Yeah.
because he had lots of land there, and there was an old junky car there. And every day after school, Donnie would go up and work on that car. And all of a sudden, he got it going, and it came round the back way. He used to drive it all the time through the back roads down to School Street, or down to Tavern on the Moors. Yeah. So we just kind of took Sconset over when we were growing up. It was ours. We felt it was ours.
So you probably didn't come into town very often.
No, just go to school.
But how'd you get in town? If you
Well, we thumb. Jimmy Killen used to date one of the Larson girls at Sanctity Light. And he came out to pick her up. And I wanted to go to town, so I used to stand on Main Street where the telephone company is now and do my thumbing. And Jimmy picked me up with Helen. And I was in town in 5 minutes. My mother knew I was in that car. Yeah.
I remember.
No, and we used to go to the town movies, and my uncles, or cousins, I should say, ran the theater, the Rogers boys, Warren and George. They always ran the theater at Dreamland, and every Wednesday and Saturday night was a movie, and 50 cents, and we took in every single movie, and we'd go back and forth to town with them.
I remember when I was babysitting in Sconset in the 60s, taking the milk truck in from where I babysat so I could get into town on my day off.
Yes.
That was
Was that the Slozak's truck?
must have been Sussex. Yeah, must have been.
Because that truck rattled, and you could tell where it was a long way away.
And then my husband used to drag race out of Cisco with one of the Slozaks.
And Jackie talking about swimming at Sconset, I always wore a bathing cap because we didn't have to learn to swim really. The ocean took us where it wanted to take us. And once we got out past the breaker, we'd just float around and have a wonderful time. And coming in, if the first wave wouldn't bring us in, the second one wouldn't bring us in, finally we'd say, well, the third one always works. And you would. You'd come in full of beach sand and your snow cap and seaweed and just shake it out and go back in. We had a lot of fun that way.
Did you have lifeguards in those days?
We had a lifeguard,
You did.
and thank goodness we did one day because Donnie came in bad shape.
Oh, yeah.
And they got him out of it.
Yeah.
And during the war, they hired women
Yeah,
for lifeguards.
when that water's rough, it just,
Yeah.
Who else?
Yes.
My husband tells a story, and I don't know if it's true. He met someone who said that their family member, and I don't remember whether they had never left Sconset to see town or had never left town to see Sconset. And I always find that so hard to believe, and they were like in their 80s, 90s, and they had never seen one part of the island. Is that believable when you're saying that people didn't go to town, or is it really just sort of probably not true?
If they didn't have a car, that could have been, if they had no way of getting there.
Yeah, well, yeah, she didn't get that. Did you know of anybody that lived in Sconset and never made it to town, or to town and never made it to Sconset? That there were people that didn't even make it from one area to the other, had never been to.
you mean never came out of Sconset?
My husband tells a story, I can't remember if he said they never made it to town or if they were from town and never been to Sconset, but it was one of those two things where I was like, that can't be, you're on this little island, you must, but I don't know if it was...
Many of us in here have known people in our childhood that never made it off of Nantucket.
Right, on the island, but I don't know about going back and forth.
Okay.
I had, of course, being one of 13, I had a lot of older sisters, and one sister lived in town. And after school, instead of going on the bus, I would call my mother and say, Mom, I'm staying at Gertrude's tonight. No, you aren't. You get home. Well, so we'd head for the Sconset Road to head home, and hoping that either Eldridge would pick us up or a Wreath would pick us up, because they all worked at the garages and places in town or at the stores. And one night, this happened, Mom says, no, you get home. I walked from town down to the Turtle Pond. The Turtle Pond is across the street from the golf links in Sconset, Coffin's Golf Links. And from Sconset, it was getting dark, and from Sconset came this little truck, and it was my daddy coming to look for me. I'll never forget it. I was so happy to see it. But imagine it, walking 8 miles and not a single car came by.
Yeah, that was the island in those years.
And that would be in 1944, 1945.
Well, the other reason is
Not a car.
gas rationing, and they weren't just out driving around in those years.
No.
Joyriding.
Your brothers always had cars, Martha.
Pardon?
Your brothers always had cars.
Sure.
Irving.
Oh, yeah,
all-
yeah.
I remember one car Irving had. Do you
Yeah.
remember one car Irving had?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Pontiac?
Yeah.
When we were 18 years old?
Yeah.
Okay.
You want to keep going?
All right.
But you know, my memory of her brothers are every one of them was a good mechanic. And
Oh, definitely.
Every one of them could
You
fix their
never
own car.
minded riding in their
They
cars.
didn't need to turn them in anywhere. They all could work on them. And if you had a problem with your car, they could fix it too. Yeah,
And boats.
yeah, right,
Donnie was our boat mechanic.
right.
I brought some pictures. You want a picture?
Yeah, send that around. Yeah. So, well, Nantucket in Wisconsin, just a snapshot of it, it's a big snapshot of it, was like that. I mean, we could
Right.
flip this over and get a few people in from Mattakit, and they'd come up with some of the same memories. And of course, we had people living out on Tuckanuck at times, and one of the things that shocked me when I was talking one time with people out there, is they didn't come to town to get their groceries, they went to Edgartown in a boat.
Yeah.
It was more convenient to go to Edgartown to do your shopping than it was to come to downtown Nantucket to do your shopping. I never gave that a thought. So, yeah, so that's,
You'll probably remember some of these.
so he's,
Kenny? That's Kenny.
yeah, there you go.
To my knowledge, I think.
Well, now, what have we left out? What other questions did you have
That's
or
my
memories?
sister and I and my oldest brother.
Anybody know whatever happened to Beverly Cahoon?
Beverly Cahoon.
She was about my age.
She was, yeah, and she was a hot ticket, man.
What's her name?
And, she used, the family used to drive the bus.
Okay.
Beverly, she had curly hair, but no one ever mentions her. You hear about different.
She loved horses, and then they got a horse, and the horse kicked her, and she was so upset because it just ruined everything. I just remember how absolutely devastated she was because when she finally got a horse, it kicked her.
Well, one gent that I was going to mention in here in the Wisconsin names was the Gwynn family. Now, they had a tea room out there.
The Gwynn family, that's right.
Pinky had it, and her mother ran the tea room, right?
She ran the tea room and they sold ice cream.
Right. And one of the timing of this is, some of you saw in the news yesterday where they finally found the Hornet on the bottom.
Yes.
And of course, what did the Hornet do about a year earlier? It launched the Raiders on Tokyo. And who was the air boss on the Hornet?
Admiral Gwynn.
Admiral Gwynn was the air boss on the Hornet, who had the job of getting those B-25s off that deck that day. And he went on to become a vice admiral, and he's up in the cemetery up here. But that Sconset family has always intrigued me a little bit, and I didn't know that much about them.
Yeah, there was Pinky, well, there was Molly, I can't think of her husband's name. Then there was Pinky, their daughter, and Marcel, Pinky was a nickname for Gwendolyn. And then there was Marcel, who was
Right.
in the service. And Pinky also went in the Navy. She was a Navy gal too.
She was a volunteer, right?
And we always could tell when Marcel was coming home. Marcel would fly over his mom and dad's house and
Why he never hit
signal,
water
I'm
tower.
coming home,
Take it out.
land at the airport.
Now, how many of you were here and remember the dedication of the airport when it was turned back over to
I remember Marcel Quinn's game out there.
And Marcel brought his entire wing. He was the wing commander he was what's called CAG 42. He was the commander of Air Group 42. And if you see any of the photographs of the airport at that time, the entire Navy Air Group 42 was parked out here at the airport for that dedication. So we brought them all. And sadly, he passed away pretty young at age 60. Yeah.
Well, Martha's brother, Alan, was very much a part of the airport out there.
Right.
Very much part of the airport.
Right.
He used to fly home on his paper plane. When I was away at school, he'd go to New Bedford, and coming home, to get home quickly, if we got to the airport and he was bringing the papers that day, we'd sit on the papers and come home. But going back, we'd go back by boat because it was a 5-hour boat ride. We weren't anxious to get back to school.
And which school was this? Which school?
I went to school in Fall River.
Okay.
Academy in Fall River, and
Okay.
then I was in high school. And that's what we used to do. We used to sit on the papers in his plane. Yes. That was a while ago.
Yes.
Yes.
I did Nantucket Wheelers, and we take the senior citizens on wheelchair bike rides, and one of our paths is up Pulpus Road. And one of the Wheelers who's passed, she always said, "That's Hollywood Hills." I don't know why they call that Hollywood Hills. But it was like this little house on the right-hand side, sort of near Moore's Inn Farm. And I wondered if anyone had ever heard of Hollywood Hills.
How about that? Who was it that owned that?
That was Mrs. McLaughlin, wasn't it?
That's
Fred McLaughlin.
right.
But
That
that's
was Fred
Hollywood Farm,
McLaughlin
but
and Evelyn
that's over on
McLaughlin.
the other side.
Yeah, that's not
That's
there.
not what you're talking
She
about.
gave a lot of scholarship money to the Nantucket High School.
She pretty much left the rest of her estate to the Nantucket School Children. Yeah.
How's this Hollywood
All of
Farm?
us that have.
Hollywood Farm.
Well,
It's
my
not
kids
by-
in the
but it's not
50s, they
by
all
Saltmarsh.
It's
know
not by
this.
Moore's End,
Right.
it's way over
Right.
on the,
Yeah,
off the
Hollywood
Pulpus
Farm.
Road.
Road is
Yeah.
Right by the ball.
I'm not sure how she came by that name. It must have been some experience of hers. But, she was a snappy person, but had a big heart, She sure did, yeah.
Mrs. McLaughlin, it's a town, but Mrs. McLaughlin was very good friends with Jenny Cormie, who was my great aunt. My great uncle was Quilly Cormie, Nantucket's last blacksmith. And we used to go out there and with Aunt Jenny in her big Chrysler and stop in to see Mrs. McLaughlin. Yeah.
So I'm not sure how the name came about it, and we'll never know unless it's written down somewhere.
And it might be the location that you're talking about. I wasn't sure. I just knew when we went along Pulpus Road that she'd say that, so I probably had the location wrong.
Yes, farther out.
Okay.
Other inputs, we've stayed pretty much with Sconset. I wrote down in my crib sheet here, when we ran out of Sconset things, then the floor is open. But anything else, any other memories that any of you have, Sconset or otherwise, during this period? The floor is open.
I bought some things, a beautiful model of the lightship was handmade by a man up in Maine from a gentleman out in Shakamo. And when I was in the house, they had all kinds of memorabilia, and there was a place, it was, when you said tea room, it was Miriam Coffin's tea room.
Do you remember that? Miriam
I got
Coffin's
a picture of it. I could bring it in another time.
Yeah.
But
Shakimo or Quays?
And this, it was said to be, he said there's a tunnel underneath there.
Quays.
That was in Quays.
That was in Quays, not Shakimo.
From Shakamo Road there, where I accessed this house. Yeah, but I'll do some more research on that and get back.
But the tunnel was in Quays.
The tunnel was for, during, not always prohibition, but to bring food in, to get food into the island, or whatever it was.
Revolutionary War period.
Yes, yeah.
Way back.
And that was Miriam Coffin's,
Right.
was the cover for it, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was moonshine.
Yeah, they had a bit of that too.
You think?
It couldn't it? Up on the Swan Road.
Yeah.
Like
I
I
can
said, the tunnel
imagine,
from the
sure.
cellar out to the beach.
Really?
Yes.
What on the other thing?
Well, Laura,
I think it's been great.
all
I
right,
think it's
we've
fabulous. Everybody's
pretty
got a lot
much
to
used up in
say.
an hour, and we haven't left Sconset, really.
Right, that's okay.
Now, what are we going to do for our next run? Anybody got ideas for for a month from now when we get together again? Make a list now and pass them in to Laura so we can go from there. Because sooner or later, we're going to run out of gas. But I knew she wasn't going to run out of gas early.
Some people like Phil Hogan, so-